All right, today we are reviewing the Japanese house's, otherwise known as Amber Bain's, debut album, Good at Falling. This album came out in 2019. It is 13 tracks long, 44 minutes long. With that said, I'm sure you could probably infer that none of these tracks are overwhelmingly long. I don't believe any of the tracks go past, 4 minutes and some change. It is an album that precedes this album that is going to come out next week, which is why we are doing this review right now. Next week's album, In the End It Always Does. Very excited. Wish I could say that I have been avoiding singles. I have definitely not been avoiding any singles. So, I've got a little taste of what that might be sonically, but that's not what we're here for today. Today we are here for Good at Falling, Amber's debut album. When we think of debut albums, we think of something grand. We think of something like, what is this artist going to give us today? What impression is this artist going to give us with this album? It's different than an EP. It's different than a mixtape. If you use those words interchangeably, then you get the point. Debut album, big deal. Sophomore album, also big deal. Just early on, it's the big deal. Now, let's talk about the sonic palette on this album. I have kind of ran into this thing where when I am looking through some artists' debut albums, sonically, sometimes they get a little stale some point through the album. You kind of sit there and at some point you're like, okay, like I see that you're trying to establish this sound, but you're kind of playing it out a little bit too much for me at the moment. Some artists can balance it, some artists can't. It's not anything to really bash an artist over them. It is their early stage of the career. So there's a little bit of grace period. Fortunately, Amber found a way to find a balance with that. Sonically, I don't feel like I'm listening to the same song over and over and over and over and over again with just rehashed lyrics. There's enough range to where I sit here and I'm still intrigued by the sounds and the melodies that are being thrown at my ears, but there is not too much range where I feel like, oh man, where did this sound just come from? Where was the build-up? Where does this fit into the album? Where's the cohesion? I feel like it's a very cohesive album, which is very nice considering that it is a very introspective album. Amber sings about all of the introspective things that you might expect. Things like love, loss, sex. These things you can do wrong in some way. Obviously, there is a line between giving shallow introspection and introspection that actually seems like, oh wow, like you actually sat here and put this out into the world, and you are so brave for doing that. And that's kind of where I'm at with this album. Amber Bain's thrown out a couple of introspective thoughts and thought processes in this album that I don't really want to dive into because it is a difficult thing as someone who reviews music. I love the introspection, but in my reviews, I don't want to give away too much just in case anybody wants to go listen for themselves. But if you are ever looking for a good introspective alternative electronic infused album, Good at Falling might be for you. So yeah, sonically, good enough range to where I don't feel like I'm listening to the same song with rehashed lyrics. And it's something that I feel like kind of took a little bit of influence from the 1975, which maybe I would be a little bit more surprised about if I didn't at some point learn that she at some point was connected to the 1975. I'm pretty sure it's Matt Healy. I may have butchered that name or got his last name wrong. If I did, I'll correct it in the post edit. But after learning that, it was kind of like, oh, okay, you know, this makes a lot of sense. She is signed to Dirty Hit, which is their label. Makes a lot of sense. And I think the Japanese House has a lot of potential. Very introspective album. Sonically sounds great. I know a lot of people weren't necessarily fond of the vocoder use, which I can kind of understand, but I'm an Eden listener. I'm kind of into that stuff. So that is something to keep in mind when you are listening to it. If you're not into all of the vocal effects and such, maybe this album might be a little bit annoying to you. But like I said, I'm an Eden fan, and he uses vocoder or vocal effects all the time. So it's not really an annoyance to me. I'm kind of just grown to enjoy it. And honestly, I think that is a very interesting artistic choice to use vocal effects, especially with Amber's voice. Not sure if anybody will be interested in looking up. I'm fairly sure she has acoustic versions of her songs on the internet somewhere. I believe she does. Absolutely beautiful singer. It comes through on the album, comes through in the acoustic version. But I'm done just going over and over about how much I just enjoy this album. For the rating, I would have to give it, I feel, a fair 8.6 out of 10. Only thing really holding this album back for me is, you know, sometimes you don't want to listen to something introspective. Sometimes you just want to listen to some music. Sometimes you want to listen to something introspective. And, you know, in the moments that you want to listen to something introspective, this is a really good album. Even if you don't want to. Great sounding album, great melodies, great rhythms. It's a really good debut album. Really excited for the sophomore album. We're gonna see how this goes. Please like and subscribe, because my animation things are out of date.